guys, this is Lauren with Lauren Watkins Art, and I'm in front of the camera. I know you guys usually only talk to my hands, but I'm trying to get over my fear of being in front of the camera and let you guys see my face. And we are in my studio right now, but I just wanted to come in and talk to you guys a little bit. Today I'm going to be doing a sketchbook tour with you. And this is my second sketchbook that I have completed, which is a really big deal because I'm a professional artist and I've only completed 2 sketchbooks in my whole life. Sketchbooks growing up always kind of intimidated me, and I was worried about having my artwork I didn't like be permanently stuck in a sketchbook to always haunt me, I guess. And it was just really, really intimidating. And as I've gotten older and I've done more artwork, I've realized that a sketchbook is kind of a safe place for me to try new things, experiment, push myself in ways, and not have the fear of it having to be a finished, completed artwork or having it waste expensive materials. And so I've really learned to enjoy working in a sketchbook, and I hope this inspires you to work in a sketchbook more, and I hope you enjoy this video. Okay, let's open this up. So the very first picture in here is of an orange still life I did. I bought this sketchbook as part of a whole group of art supplies I bought for my birthday, which is in February. And so I opened it up and started experimenting with my new supplies. I used gouache on this because I bought a whole bunch of gouache and some new palettes and some sketchbooks for my birthday present to myself. Because that's always what I want, is art supplies and baking supplies. And so that's what I got. So there's the still life of my oranges. And this was painted on like the front page paper. It's not actually the same paper later on in the book. It's a little bit thinner. But there you go. And then the second one was painted, I think, the same day. I was just kind of experimenting with using multiple mediums. And so I was using gouache and water and colored pencils and ink and kind of just seeing how they layered up and just having fun experimenting. Then the next piece is from International Women's Day, when I wrote, "If we mean to have heroes, statesmen, and philosophers, we should have learned women." And I just wrote that to honor all the women who paved the way before me, that made it possible for me to be able to go to school and pursue the dreams that I want. So there we go. Then my purple horse. I was really excited with how this one turned out. I used gouache and watercolor pencils and regular watercolors and ink and just had fun experimenting. But I find horses are one of the animals I struggle with drawing the most. They're not like a bear where I can hide mistakes with fur. They're so muscular that you have to get their anatomy pretty close. So I was pretty excited with how this one turned out. And it ended up being a great model because later on I ended up painting a purple unicorn with pink and gold, with a pink and gold mane for my daughter's bedroom. And so I ended up using this as the color reference for that. And then Some Days Are Diamonds and Some Days Are Rocks by Tom Petty. It's a quote from Tom Petty from his song Walls. You know, the DMV just sucks your soul, and this was one of those days that I learned that. I had to go to the county and register my cars that day, and then I had to go renew my license, and I had to bring my kids with me, and it was March, and it was like -20 outside here in Montana, and so walking between the cars was a pain, and then being stuck in the DMV for 3 hours and not being able to get my license because it was out of a state one and they wanted me to do something weird with it. It was just one of those days, and if you're a mom, you might relate, where after you're on edge so much trying to keep your kids from crying, then you cry, and it's just a mess. So that was very much of a rock of a day, but some days are more diamonds than others. So I did that to commemorate that crappy day. And then this was the first painting I did on a vacation, where I painted a cherry pie, and then a macaroon, a French macaroon. I don't know. I'm not French, and I'm not very good at pronouncing things correctly. But I sat and paint, but I can make these, and I can make them quite well. But I painted this and the macaroon, or macaron, at my in-laws' house while we were down visiting, and I just sat on the couch and sketched while we chatted away, and the kids played out in the yard, so it was really fun. And then there's the castle. My daughter wanted me to paint a picture of a castle for her, so that's what I did. This one was really fun to paint and sketch out, and she told me about the princesses who lived in the castle, and we just had lots of fun while I worked on this one. Then some mushrooms. This one, I loved how forested I made it look, and the light coming in through the back. I took my gouache with me because I got my gouache and new art supplies right before I took this trip. So it was really fun to experiment with them and play with them while I was on vacation. But I took watercolor pencils, and you can see the gouache in the foreground and the ink. So there's that. And then here's another mushroom that I did around the same time. But I kind of tried a different approach without the ink. Tried to keep the gouache more transparent, like watercolor, and just experimented with that. And then of the tulips I painted, or a tulip I painted that I was trying to see how realistic I could get it using the supplies that I had. And I could have pushed it even further, but when you're on vacation, you got to go do other things than just sit and paint sometimes. So there's those. And then of like an amethyst crystal that's all rough. I didn't have a very good white at that point with my gouache set, and so the whites aren't very as bright as I would have liked them on here, but just another fun sketch. Then a little seascape. I tried to keep the gouache really transparent for this, and just try it out and see how I can push the medium as much as I could. So there's that. And then this is the beginning of another vacation I took. And this is one I painted at my in-laws' house again, because my in-laws' house we live in Montana, and my in-laws live in Idaho, and my family lives in Utah, and so their house is right along the way as we travel down, so we visit them whenever we go down to Utah, or most of the time, unless we go a different way to see other things. So this was the start of it, and I've actually gone through the next couple of paintings before in another sketchbook tour, a vacation sketchbook tour I did. So I'll just be showing you the highlights from this trip. It was the trip we did going down to Moab. So there you see, this is when we were leaving Montana, and we were still snowed in, and it was just barely starting to warm up, and the grass was starting to dry out. The snow was starting to melt from the grass, and we were starting to see the old dead grass from the previous year poking through. And then middle of nowhere, Moab, the desert, then the Red Rocks and Canyonlands National Park, and where we were biking through Moab, and just Fisher Towers and our campground. I love Moab. When my husband and I were in college, we went there all the time. On spring breaks or just any vacation days we could, because we love mountain biking and hiking, and now we love rock climbing, and so we try to go there as much as we can. It's a favorite spot of ours. This is in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is a couple hours out of Moab that we went and explored. And there's my family's home, the mountains by my family's home that I painted. And on this trip, we had a girls' trip to Park City that I painted. And the fun thing about living in Montana is even when you're not in Yellowstone, you sometimes still find buffalo on the side of the road. So there we have that. And then just some spots through Big Sky as we were driving home. Everything's starting to turn green. And a sketch that I never ended up painting. Sometimes those happen. And then this is in June. This is in Billings, where I live. And this is by the Yellowstone River. It was a sunset that I painted that was being reflected on the river. And it was absolutely gorgeous. This is, I painted this on a day that my husband was home that night. And so I went out to paint and get a break from my kids. And this is where we like to go biking. This is at a park we like to go biking and hiking at, and it's gorgeous there. And a bear was just there, so yeah. When in Montana, watch for bears. Then this was up on the rim, so this is the other side of Billings. Billings, Montana is surrounded by gorgeous rims, and you can see the mountains in the distance. And so this is a sketch I did up there. It was just a 5-minute sketch. I wanted to see what I set a timer. I wanted to see what I could create in 5 minutes. So there we go. It's loose and fun. Here's our trip in Cody, Wyoming. We did a little day trip out to Cody to explore and see what was out there. And so there's this picture. It was a really pretty day. All the alfalfa fields and the hay fields and everything gorgeous on the way. And then here's from another trip we did. This is the road trip I took with my kids through Yellowstone down to Utah. My husband was out of town, so it was just me and my kids road tripping through. So we started on the Beartooth Highway and then went through Yellowstone and through Grand Teton National Park and then through Star Valley. So if you don't know where the Beartooth Highway is, it is this really awesome highway that takes you from Red Lodge, Montana, through the mountains to Cook City, which is where the entrance to the northeast entrance to Yellowstone is. And on the road that you take there, you go above the alpine line, so above the tree line, and you are the summit is over 10,000 feet, and you see herds of mountain goats and bighorn sheep up there, and we've hit it during super blooms. So you had fields and fields of these beautiful flowers, and it's just absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite places. We go there multiple times a year since we're so close to it. So there's a sketch I did of it. There's the Beartooth Mountains, and then a sunset from that we saw along the way over some fields and the big dark clouds that were backlit by the sunset that just looked awesome. And then Yellowstone, just along the river, some big old rocks in there, and just sketching and having fun and seeing. Then on that trip, we made it down to Hinckley, Utah, which is where my great-great-grandfather lived and built a house. And we sketched this up, and I never finished it, but we still have the house that he built, and we go out there for family reunions and to ride four-wheelers. So there's that. And then when I came back from that trip, I went out, and the kids and I went and watched a sunset in Billings, and I painted it up. And it's just gorgeous. We live in a beautiful world, and I particularly love Montana. It has a special spot in my heart. And then this was just one day at the park. I was waiting for some friends to join us. I sat at the table and painted one of the trees in the park and watched my kids play. So nothing crazy. It was super hot. You can see how it was really roughly blended. It's because it was so hot the paint was drying before I could even really get a chance to blend it. So the dangers of painting outside in the summertime. Then this was last August from our Glacier National Park trip. A fire started right before, like 2 days before we got to Glacier. And it smoked the whole thing out because the fire was in Glacier, and it closed part of the road, so we couldn't see the whole thing, and we couldn't see very far because it was so smoky. But what we did see was absolutely gorgeous. But you can see how I have it all painted like really pale and smoky. That's because that's what it looked like while we were there. So just one quick sketch. I didn't paint too much while we were in Glacier, but I did take a lot of reference photos. And then this is a skull that I started to sketch. It was from a logo on my husband's hat, because right before we got to Glacier, we went from Billings over to Missoula, and we stopped and went to the Pearl Jam concert there on our way to Glacier. And it was such an awesome concert. We loved it. And anyways, the hat that my husband bought from the concert had kind of a skull design on it that was really cool, that I started to draw, but obviously never finished. And then right after that trip, we got home, got situated, and kindergarten started for my daughter. And it was a very bittersweet day for me. As a mom, it was the first time that my kids had kind of been out of my control or my influence for that long of a time, and with people that aren't family members. And it was hard to see my daughter be all grown up, because I still picture her as a baby sometimes, and time just goes super fast. So to commemorate her starting kindergarten, I made this little sketch using my Zig clear color brush pens. I forgot what they're called exactly, but they're just brush pens that I used that are water-based, that you can reactivate once they're on the paper and blend out. And it says, "To learn to read is to light a fire," a quote from Victor Hugo. So there's that. And then some doodles. I painted this one and this at the park while my boys played after dropping my daughter off at school. Then I did some watercolor lessons. So I was just writing notes down. I think it was the same. This was all in the same park session. So I was just kind of brainstorming what to teach and what I was going to paint and how we were going to do our picture while we were there. And then some more doodles. Sometimes it's just fun to doodle and to not stress too much about realism or what things look like when you're painting. And then I took a break. These were in August, end of August. Didn't paint anything for a few months. And then I did this for October, or Inktober. And so there was a poppy, and that was pen and ink and the Zig brush pens that I used to color it in. And then this one, this was the theme, Winter Chill. And so I did a very monochromatic painting for this one. Just very black and white with little hints of purple and a little bit of blue. And then I did a sketch of Montana in the fall. Now, a lot of these sketches I do, especially like from our road trips and vacations, I'm painting in the car. So I'll either see the scene and I'll hurry and paint it while we're driving, or I'll take a picture and work on it in the car. But my husband's driving, I'm in the front seat with watercolors on my lap, painting away, sketching with a marker, throwing treats back at my kids or toys or whatever they need. And so it's a little bit chaotic, not the most refined artwork I create. But it's fun, and it's a fun way to document what we've been up to. So there's one I did of Montana in the fall. And then this is a scene from when we were in Idaho. This was from a few years before. This was a reference photo I took while snowshoeing. I wanted to do a scene from Montana, but last winter, the whole month of February was like -30 to -40, and it was just super cold. So I opted to stay inside and use an old reference photo, then go out and take some new ones. And then art goals that I made for the year. So there's my goals that I set for the year. And then one of my goals for the year was to read more. / listen to some more audiobooks this year. I love to read, and I realized that I wasn't reading enough. I've missed reading books and listening to new books and all those types of things. And so I made it a goal to read 2 books a year. I also included audiobooks in that because then it's easier for me to reach my goal and still be an attentive mother, because I can listen to the book while I do dishes or laundry and those types of things, or while I'm working on a painting and stuff. So then I can kind of reach my other goals at the same time. But at the beginning of the year, I reread The Hobbit because it's one of my absolute favorite books. And so to commemorate that, I painted a little scene of Baggin, which was really fun to create. And then I did this. Now this is a little sketch I did. It was inspired by an artist that I saw on YouTube or on Instagram, who does embroidery. And she creates these beautiful landscape scenes. I can't remember her name right now, but I will have her information in the description box below. And I was really inspired by the directional aspect of what she creates. And so I wanted to try that with watercolor and get that impressionistic feel. And so there was a little sketch of that. So you can see the sky is very directional, and it's all kind of bursting out of the clouds. The distant background area of the field is very horizontal to visually make it seem further away. And then up close, it's very vertical. And so just experimenting with the directions the lines go, I wanted to create that feel of movement and direction in something kind of stationary, like a still life or a landscape or those types of things. So there's that. And then the beginning of some portraiture that I was practicing, and doing some profiles and practicing blending skin tones and those types of things using a limited color pencil set and using wax colored pencils. And then some practicing different shapes of mouths and shading them. And then just practicing blending and mixing colors. Colored pencils are one of the mediums that I really struggle with. I struggle having a light hand and blending and building up color slowly. I haven't worked in colored pencil a lot, and so it's one of the mediums I struggle with. And so I was just kind of, after doing these, I wanted to just practice blending and layering down color and kind of seeing what I could create with the pencils I had. I think these were with Prismacolor colored pencils that I have. And then just a little watercolor wildflower scene, just nothing crazy, something simple. And then I took a break and I didn't work in the sketchbook for a while. I was working in a different one because I didn't go on any trips for a while, and that's usually when I work on this. But I went on vacation last month, and I needed to paint a scene for a little illustration for one of my friends who's expecting twins. And so I had a couple colors with me, but I wanted some different ones. And I was at the art store with my mom, helping her pick out art supplies for my sister. And so I picked up some new colors. So I was swatching all the ones I had and seeing like what I could create with it and kind of get an idea of how I could color in this illustration I had in my mind. So obviously I was working upside down when I was laying down my colors. And then the illustration I ended up doing for my friend was a little illustration of 2 elephants standing up. So not this one, but 2 little elephants standing up, holding balloons with their tails and having a rainbow over them, because she had experienced a miscarriage right before she got pregnant with twins. And so I wanted to honor the baby that was lost and the twins that she was expecting and the joy after her personal storm. So there's that. I I was experimenting with the colors and how to lay them down and what color mixes I wanted to create with the gray, for the gray of the elephant. And so I was just experimenting there. I didn't know whether I was going to ink the elephants in the illustration or if I wasn't. So I inked this one, and I didn't like it because my marker I had was just too thick. So I ended up going a different route with the illustration for her. And then these are some scenes from my trip along the way down while I was visiting my mom. So there was a scene from Island Park and some water from one of the lakes at Yellowstone, and then a desert landscape. So if we went out for a little ride through one of the fields and took this picture. And a little scene from Star Valley, where I drove through on the way down. A little sunset from an art lesson I did with my sister. We stayed up really late, and I was showing her how to use watercolors that she had just gotten for her birthday. And then my kids wanted to paint, and so while we were at my in-laws, they used watercolor pencils on watercolor paper, painted up some pictures, and then I put them in the sketchbook because they wanted them to be in there. And so I thought that was a fun way to commemorate them. And then on this trip, it was just me and the kids, and so I didn't get much time to sketch live. So I did some, and especially to ink in and color in. So I drew in some pictures while we were through Yellowstone, and then I inked them and painted them once I got home. So I did this one, and I did it with watercolor pencil. You can see how it's a little bit more texture, and that's from the watercolor pencil. So these ones are a little bit more refined than some of my other sketches because it wasn't done in the car. So word to the wise, if you want to have more detail, more accurate coloring, don't paint in the car while it's moving. Just FYI. And then there's this one. This was a scene between Norris and Mammoth areas of the park. And I loved when we were driving by how bright this green looked next to the blue and the dark mountains. And that was like one of the main reasons I stopped. I was driving along and it just was so bright and the colors were so contrasting that I just had to stop and take a reference photo for it. That's one of the things I notice as an artist, and having been painting a lot more landscapes, is as we're driving along, I really notice a lot of lighting and how things are lit. So how this was all aglow with the light, and how the mountains were more in shadow and more contrasted. And so between color and lighting, those are the things I pay attention to the most when I'm looking at a landscape. And then Grand Teton National Park. And this is from a photo I took where we were picnicking, and it was a gorgeous spot to sit and have a picnic. So there's that. And then at the very end of the sketchbook, I put, "Have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it." And that's kind of sounds depressing, but what I liked about it, this quote, and why I put it in here, was because it was a great reminder for me that I don't have to try and create perfect artwork. And as someone who sells artwork for a living, it can get really intimidating. And as you're painting, you're like, is the person that commissioned this painting going to like it? Or is this going to be something that sells? And it can get really, you can let fear and insecurity really hold you back from reaching your goals. And that's, I think, part of the reason why I've been using sketchbooks more than ever in my life, is because it's a place that it's a safe spot for me to just experiment, and I don't have to worry about things being perfect, and I can just have fun with it. And so this was a reminder for me to just not worry about things being perfect and just have fun and enjoy the process of creating. So that's the last page of my sketchbook. And then I just have some papers that I need to pull out that are extra sketchbook watercolor papers, and then a blossom from when I was in Grand Junction, Colorado with my kids, and they wanted to save one of the beautiful blossoms. But that's my sketchbook, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the sketchbook tour, and I hope it inspired you to draw in your sketchbooks more and to create and explore and push yourselves in ways that you wouldn't normally push yourself when you are working on expensive pieces of paper or canvas or whatever medium it is you work in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and please subscribe to my channel. And if you want to see more videos by me, please look at the ones over here or click over here.